Person, Mr. Toad's Wild Ride.
I think we have one more.
I don't know.
So this is our
Do you?
sheet.
Oh, okay. Because this one's on immigration. So, I'm Jerry Mead. I'm an immigration attorney. I've been for 26 years. Came out of New York City, practiced in Fort Wayne. Seen it about all, not everything you can see. But one of the things that my office does is we do represent a lot of people who have been victimized once they come to the United States. And victimization takes many, many faces, and it also is subject to interpretation and cultural mores and norms. And so we do a lot of educating, and we've been really, really blessed to work a lot with the Center for Nonviolence here in town. And through them, we've been able to get the word out, and through them, we've gotten people in. So one of the things that we like to do, because in an office you have to make money, because I'm not a nonprofit, but we also take those cases specifically that are sometimes cases of first impression, meaning, yeah, it's on the books, but we never do it, kind of a thing. We take a lot of, I don't want to say a lot, but we have clientele that I would say were not the warm and fuzzy clientele that you might love to represent, because everybody has a right and everybody has a need, and because we're all human, we all need our day. So today we're going to talk about several things, and a lot of them kind of cycle out of that Violence Against Women's Act. Does anybody know what that is? Yeah, okay, I see a head, yay! So, Violence Against Women's Act is something that is not in the law. It's like it's what I call the wingdingers portion of immigration law. It's one of those things where it's like, oh, every 3 years we'll review it, then we decide what we want to do, and we retool it a little bit, and then we give it to you, but we never give it to you forever. So the Violence Against Women's Act is a huge misnomer, because it's not just for women. And it has several different pieces to it, and we're going to go through some of those different pieces and permutations, and I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about how you apply them, because as I think a lot of you probably represent people or help people out who've been victimized. Is that true? Yeah, I see some hands. That's good. Okay, well, this might help you to, well, I'm hoping to make it so that you can understand a little bit better about how to apply the chaos that's going on around you in someone else's life, and to kind of help focus that with a minimum amount of effort and a maximum amount of positive coming out of the situation. So the Violence Against Women's Act is for everybody, but not equally. So it's much harder to represent a male that has been victimized than it is a female. And you want to talk about the really hard cases? Why don't we try Muslim males? To prove that a Muslim male has been abused by an American female, well, it just doesn't get harder than that. And we've done that successfully many times. But it is difficult, and you have to start breaking down kind of those barriers. And we end up actually with the people who do this at immigration, they're trained, but they still come with all the prejudices that we all have, and they bring them to work with them every day. And we have to challenge them to see things in a different way, to see things as an even keel. And in one case, they asked me for something that they have never asked me for on a female case, and it was a Muslim male. And I turned around and I said, oh, okay, we're going to play that way? Then I'm suing you in court because you're discriminating against my client, and you're asking for all these witnesses and all these things, and you wouldn't dare do that with a female, would you? The next thing I got in the mail was approval, because they knew. So you have to stand up, and it's okay to stand up for your clients. Sometimes, you do need to know what to pick your fight, but sometimes the unusual needs to happen so it becomes the norm. Okay? So the Violence Against Women's Act covers anybody who's abused by a U.S. citizen or permanent, lawful permanent resident that's either a spouse, a minor child, or a parent. So we actually do elder abuse, which is kind of neat, because we didn't have that earlier in this, but the latest version we have that. It only really covers when it's a spousal thing. You have to actually be a spouse or in a polygamy situation where you understood that the other person was not indeed married to someone else, okay? The other thing that we're going to talk about is U visas, and those are people who are victims of qualified crimes and have done what they needed to do to meet the qualifications for the visa. We're going to talk about trafficking in humans, and yes, it does happen in Fort Wayne. If you've never run into one, I sure have. And then we're going to talk about special immigrant juvenile. And that is really interesting because of how it's applied in this state, and especially what goes on in Allen County. And I've used it on a lot of different types of situations. And I've actually used it with, you know, the children that have been caught at the border, that you hear about the detention facilities and then they let them out. They're all in deportation or removal. And we've used that to stop that process and get them permanent residency. And it really doesn't take very long. So pull up your socks, we're going for it, okay? So here we go. Violence Against Women's Act. So what happens is that the Violence Against Women's Act was an amazing thing because it was so amazing to see the US government look and say, okay, we have all these people who are being victimized within their own ethnic communities, and they're not calling the police. And it's social unrest. It's like the wild, wild west out there. And I mean, because let's face it, there really aren't any rules, right, until there are consequences. So you can get away with anything, right, until somebody catches you. So when you see the guy who's like killed 6 of his neighbors and eaten all of them, and then he stands in front of the court and he says, oh, I'm really sorry. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, yeah, you're really sorry you got caught. But you were really okay doing your thing before that because you weren't seeking any help. All right? So I thought it was a really huge step forward for mankind. And, you know, immigration is not kinder and gentler. It never has been. It just keeps escalating. It's more expensive. It's harder to do. I mean, it's what I used to take me 20 pages to do in 1990 takes me 110 pages to do the same process. So, and the cost, where like 1990 that process cost about $190, the filing fees on that are over $2,500 now. So we see this exponential thing. The nice thing about the Violence Against Women's Act is that to actually make the application, which is an I-360, there's no filing fee. So that's kind of cool. And they're very good about giving waivers, even for the adjustment of status piece and work authorization, all that kind of stuff. So it makes it really accessible. And in this area, they're very kind. And it's common for them to waive those fees. So you're not fighting on it. There's some other kinds of uses that there's no way you're ever going to get a fee waiver. But this one they give out pretty readily. And it's wonderful because it needs to happen. Okay, so let's talk about how do I qualify. So I have somebody comes into my office and tells me a horrible story. And that story, in order to qualify, right, the person that's there can either be physically beaten, or mentally, or emotionally kind of tortured, and that'll work. And as we kind of go through this, I'll kind of give you some examples of things I've seen, and then you're going to look at me like, really? That kind of works. But, you know, I mean, you have the normal where somebody comes in and somebody beat them. But now let's say I've got somebody who isn't married to that person anymore. That divorce has to be less than 2 years old at the time of filing. Okay? Which is really, really critical. Because sometimes people don't know they're divorced. Because, you know, treacherous spouse does whatever they want, and they say, oh, I don't know where they are. Well, then they publish it somewhere where they think they are, but they aren't really there either. And then it all just kind of falls apart. For children, you have to be unmarried and under the age of 25. Under the age of 21, you don't have to do an extra evidentiary proof, but under 25 you do. So you kind of need to be in the household, and there's got to be a little more activity there. And then they do parents of U.S. citizens and permanent residents. All right, so polygamy is covered. So if you're in a polygamous relationship but you didn't think you were, that is abusive. Having affairs, that's abusive. Someone biting you and beating you and burning you and cutting you. Somebody forcing you to do sexual acts that you're not comfortable with. That's abuse. Somebody goes out and says, she's a blankety blank, or does stuff to you when you're out in public so people look at you and scorn you. I mean, abuse takes so many avenues. I had a gentleman, since this is a Muslim, let's talk about it. Really nice guy from Egypt. Married some crazy woman from here. So they get married, right? She does the fiancé visa, she brings him in, she does all this stuff. And then she starts sneaking pork into his food. Then she'd be like, yeah, that wasn't all me. One day, she went nuts, pushed him down the basement and locked him in there for a couple days. The only thing down there was a freezer full of pork. That is huge mental abuse. This poor guy lost like 30 pounds in 5 weeks, 6 weeks. I mean, that is truly disgusting. I mean, and that is abusing somebody at their core, right? I mean, think about it. That's your religious beliefs. That's where you're going for the rest of eternity. It kind of doesn't get any bigger than that. Other things that we've seen, one gentleman used to rape his wife pretty regularly, and he would bite her. And the one day she went like this, and you could see all the teeth marks all up and down her arms from years of abuse. You know, oh, he doesn't really abuse me, he just hits me. And they come in. I had one who came in with the hand marks on her throat, and she was pregnant. And he had thrown her down the stairs, and you could just see the marks. And we prepared the application, and then before we were to file it, she came and got it because she decided she didn't want out. So everybody has their limitations of when I'm done, right? Because you're not done until you're done, and nobody knows where that is except for you. And you pretty much don't know until you get there. So we see a lot of that, and you know, one of the things that I do in my office for sanity is when I sit down with somebody, and if we're going to take that case, they're told, this is your one shot. We do it now, we will help you through it. We will do whatever you need to get through this. We refer them to different social services, we try to get them to all the right people, but the bottom line is that if you don't follow through, I'm done. Because I personally, as a human being, can't go through this with 100 people all at the same time. You have to save yourself some days, because, you know, if I'm not doing this, there really aren't a lot of people to take my place around here. So, you know, you also have to make sure that you set your boundaries. I won't take a case if somebody's living with the abuser. Can you do it? Yes, you can do those immigration papers. I did it once when this Colombian woman was married to a drug dealer who decided to put a gun to her head the night before, and she says, you know what, my immigration attorney, she says I don't need you. Well, it's not really hard to figure out who that is. He showed up at my door, packing heat the next day, and fortunately one of my buddies who is an immigration attorney from Chicago was visiting, and he was a Vietnam vet. And so he got in there and basically told him, I'm going to do you and I'll bury you. So get off the premises, I'm calling the police. And we really had to do that. And that's why when people come to my office, I don't know, I don't recognize any of you, so I don't think anybody's been to my office. I have 2 really big dogs. They're in the back of the office, but if you really do something, you know, They're there for a reason. Two big collies. They sound really mean, but scratch their bellies and they're pretty much done. But they don't need to know that, right? They don't need to know that, you know, probably a Twinkie or a ho-ho and you just made a friend forever. But they're there because I want that person that thinks they're gonna come in and cause trouble, I want them to just wonder. Because my one little puppy is about 27.5 inches to the shoulder, and he can take any gate that you got. So, you know, I just, you know, and they'll go stand at the gate. If somebody's not too good, they'll just kind of stand at that gate and kind of give you the growl. So, you know, those are things that when you work in this area, because everybody says, oh, you're an immigration attorney, you fill out forms. No, I don't fill the forms, I have staff for that. We do a lot of other things. So things that we look at. So I have somebody who comes to me and tells me the story. If it's physical, the first thing I'm going to say is, hey, do we have any police reports? Do we have any restraining orders? Usually I don't. I mean, like 99% of the time I don't. It's very rare that I have somebody who has stood up for themselves at that level, because it's scary. And that other person's saying, hey, you know what, I'm here, and you can do anything you want, but I'm keeping the kids, and you're out of here. So you call the police, that's fine, because I'm just gonna tell them whatever. And I have had where somebody called the police, and the US citizen spouse then went and ran into a door, and scratched themselves up, and then when the police get there, say, look what she did to me. And then you have to get past that. So there are organizations when we do these, when I don't have that kind of stuff, and I have had people come in right afterwards, and we're sitting there and I'm mapping them and taking photographs of all their bruises and cuts and bite marks and whatever. Those days are hard. You know, those are a hard day in my office to sit there. I had somebody who came in and had, was gunshot wound that was less than a week old, and it kind of went in and ran across the clavicle and then came out, and I'm taking pictures and marking it because we needed it. And anytime the police take pictures, they will not give us a copy. So we have to document ourselves. So even if you call the police and they do all this stuff, we're not allowed to have it. And immigration never gives you subpoena power, so I can never get it. Okay, so when you have a family, because I think it's, when you have abuse, it's everybody, let's face it. So let's say I have this abusive relationship, it's not necessarily just mom and dad, right? Sometimes it's dad and the stepkid or whatever. When I have one family member that has been abused, if there are any other minor children, like if it was a child, all the brothers and sisters would take, and the non-abusive parent would take as a derivative of that child's application. So when we do these, a lot of times what I do is I make a primary for each family member, and then we hook in everybody else on those. So in case something happened with one application, I just kind of made sure that if anybody in that family gets approved, basically everybody else is gonna. And since you're not paying filing fees, and we have all that stuff, we put it into data banks in our computers, so a lot of things are filled. We don't have a lot of extra time in it, so it's not like somebody's being billed, because you're never billed for those kind of, because those are kind of my strategic decisions and not the clients. And they're in a situation usually that, you know, they're not paying much at all, and we allow them to pay over a very long amount of time if they are paying. We also ask if you've ever been in a shelter. So we actually have contact with the shelter here once in a while. They're always pretty wonderful. So that's kind of the first two, right? So I kind of give you the mental with the pork, right? We've kind of gone through the physical, which I think is the easiest one to get your head around, because you're thinking, okay, he does this, he hits her, there's a welt, she bites him, there's a mark. It's a kind of an easy one to kind of figure out, okay, yeah, we've got an abuse there. I think the thing is that you have to remember to make sure that you don't get so desensitized to it. Because sometimes you sit there and you think, well, I only slapped her once. I mean, really, when you have somebody else who's been beaten half the time, but it's all abuse. And that's what you have to remember under law. It's all abuse, and it's all in how you write it. One of the things that we try to do in our applications, which makes them very successful, is we try to show that cycle. You know, that beautiful cycle of I beat the crap out of you. Gee, I'm really sorry, baby. It's never going to happen again. Then no matter what you do, it's never right. And then there's that, you know, that blow up again, and it just keeps going around and around and around. We try to help our clients when they write their affidavits, which is horrifying. I think some people don't file because they just can't face it. Because they relive it, right, as you go through and you tell everybody kind of what happened. But what I tell most of the clients is you need to understand that it's also very freeing. This is a way to start healing by getting it out. If you get it on paper and you get it out, you know, I'm a huge believer that no matter what bad happens to you, you can make a good of it. Now, yeah, some days it's really hard to see, you know, when you feel like you're in over your head, but, you know, you can. You have to look for it. And I think we are perhaps not trained to be terminal optimists. I have a tendency to be very, kind of that optimistic kind of person. And I have this great drive to make sure that everything that bad happens, I feel like, okay, I can't change that, but I can sure change how it affects me. I can sure change how it affects the people around me. I can help my clients. And so we really try to focus on the positive with them, and that by looking at those skeletons, by facing their ghosts, you're really setting yourself free. Emotional abuse, a lot of what we see are like curse words and threatening deportation. We have a lot of that when there are kids involved. Yeah, you know, I'm going to take the kids, you're never going to see them. That's it, you're just never going to see them. A form of abuse, which I think is really interesting, because most people don't really realize it, if your spouse will not file immigration papers for you to get you legal status if they can, that is abuse. Because it's so central to you staying here. It's such a big part of, you know, those core values and you know, your future. It's your whole future. We see a lot of you're worthless, you're lazy, you're incapable. We've had this. So we've had people who, let's say they had children from a prior relationship and the spouse brings them in. You're going to do what I want because otherwise I'm never filing for the kids. And we have a lot of that. And in the VAWA provisions, let's say I have a mom or dad, and they have these children from another relationship, and this is what's going down, and we ended up with a VAWA claim, we can actually claim those children outside the U.S., never been here, and we can still immigrate them. They're a follow to join, but it can be done. It's not, you know, the easiest thing, and it's time consuming, but you can reunite a family that way. Humiliation in public or private, threatened violence, oh, this one's great, denied the necessities of life. Seen any of those? Yeah, I had one guy who decided he was pissed off at his wife, so he basically pulled all the plumbing out of the kitchen, so she had to do everything by a bucket, by a spigot outside, all the cooking, all the drinking water. He made her schlep that around. I had another guy who had married a woman she was from, I don't know, like Ukrainian, Russian, somewhere over there, an old Soviet bloc country. He brought her in. When she came into my office, her thighs were smaller around than my upper arms. He was starving her to death. He didn't want her to get fat. So he'd lock her in the house, no phone. He had padlocks on everything so she couldn't get any food. He would go, and he was fat, he would go and eat all day long and all evening and come back late, and she'd get about this much rice and like a glass of milk, and that was it. She was in dire straits, and what had happened is finally a neighbor had called because they hadn't seen her in and out for a long time. The police came and documented he had padlocks and chains on everything there, you know, and they lived far enough out that she didn't have a car, she didn't know how to drive. I mean, he had kept her hostage. We've also had the ones about if you leave me, I'm gonna kill the kids. You know, if somebody says, hey, if you leave me, I'm gonna kill myself, I just look at my client and say, well, that's their choice, they're an adult. If they choose to do that, that's not really your fault. That's just them kind of holding something over you because they know you still care about them. So, you know, and that is what it is. But when they're like, yeah, I'm gonna go out and kill the kids, that's a whole different story. All right, so things we need to know. Abuser is never contacted about these applications. When I have somebody who goes to court, and I have to write these once in a while, somebody did me a huge favor, one of the attorneys in town, and so they went and qualified me in all the courts as an immigration expert. Like, I don't know if it's the whole state, just the top of this, I don't know. So I never have to go, it's great. I just send a letter, and that's it. I mean, it's read into evidence, we're done. So that's always like really, really helpful because I don't like to be traveling around too much. I like to go to my desk and sit there and kind of do my thing all day. So what happens is the court will come back and whether there's a divorce, there's child custody or whatever, and I just send them a thing saying, you know, pursuant to blah, 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 Violence Against Women's Act, this person's a federally protected witness and you're not allowed to ask anything. And the way it's done in immigration is that you cannot find out any information even if you have the tracking numbers for the cases. So if I want to know something, I have to call the one place in the US that they kind of adjudicate these things, and I have to speak to an officer. They won't even really take my email because they're not sure. So if you email them, they call you back because they want to talk to you. And you know, when you do immigration law, I don't know about other areas of law, but I know when you do immigration law, the FBI and stuff, they all have, I mean, they know everything you've ever done. They really keep tabs on us. So I know they know what I sound like and, you know, everything else. Because I've had some things where I've gotten some calls about people trying to fraudulently use like my letterheads and signatures and stuff from overseas. Which those are always days that you think, oh. But then we get home and just like, I'm home. Tomorrow's a new day, right? Reboot the system. If an application is not granted, it does not trigger removal. The only time that it would trigger removal is if you were, I don't know how to say this, guns felon, drug runner, murderer, terrorist. Those four you're kind of done for in this country anyway. Okay, but the VAWA does have an interesting little thing to it. It has a little caveat. I don't know if you know this, but you know, when you go down to admissibility, right? Admissibility means in immigration is, do you meet the standards that you are allowed to get here? You're allowed to be here, right? We're gonna admit you, we're gonna give you the ticket, the big green card for you to be here. And so we have these inadmissibility statutes, and they're kind of interesting. I mean, some of them are still holdovers from, you know, were you a Nazi between 1939 and 1946? You know, are you a practicing communist? Are you a polygamist? Do you plan to practice polygamy in the United States? I mean, there's a whole list of these things. But one of the grounds of inadmissibility is on mental health. Have you, in the past, been a danger to yourself or others? And in the future, you know, are you likely to be a danger to yourself or others? Okay, so now we're talking about post-traumatic stress disorder. I had somebody who was autistic and had been raped at school, and that's Allen County. And, you know, she had PTSD, so she didn't know how to deal with this. I mean, here she is, you know, she's high school age, right? You can't really tell anybody what's going on because you can't form the words. You can't do all these things. So we would have a lot of self-injurious behavior. And because they were illegal at the time, right, she's not getting the mental health care and the physical health care that she really needs. Because if, I don't know, does anybody know anybody who's autistic? Yeah, my son is. And you know, diet is a huge thing, and therapies are a huge thing, and she's not getting any of them. Because mom had married a US citizen, she was from a prior relationship, and he just left. We're gonna ignore my phone because I didn't turn it off. Bad girl, bad girl. So what happened was, in the Violence Against Women's Act, there's a little caveat that says, hey, if you have that ground of inadmissibility, we'll waive it. So I had a lot of fighting with immigration over it because it just had never been done. And so as we were getting down, it took me 2 years of fighting with immigration to get past this, and they sent her file to the Center for Disease Control because if you have a mental illness or you have a physical illness, they'll ship that down so that they're making that assessment. And my letter to them was, you have no right to do that, here's your regulations, here's the case law that you have to file your own rules, you get that file back. Which they eventually did, and they approved it, but it was just, it was just heartbreaking to see this person, and when I had to take her down for an interview in Indianapolis, I'm like, I can't have a male interviewer, I can't have somebody of a certain ethnic persuasion because the person that had harmed her was of a certain ethnic persuasion and she trips out every time she sees somebody, all this stuff so that we could make it through the interview. And she was so good that day, and she sat there and the officer says, okay, is there anything you need to tell me? And she says, I love America, and I want to be here. And the officer says, that's okay, sweetie. I'm going to sign the paperwork so you can stay. And that was it. So you have those moments when you kind of do reach somebody, They're not as often as you would like, but they're there. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about, let's go.
Okay, so wanted to ask when we were on the emotional abuse part, my only experience with immigration or an immigration attorney was when I was married to an Egyptian. Who was in the process, and eventually toward when we were separated, he basically stated that one of the 3 conditions for us staying together was that he wanted me to help him get his green card, then after that he was going to leave me. And if I didn't, then he would blackmail me. And had gone through my email, pulled out things from before we were married and everything, and was like, I'm going to send this to everybody that And so I'm wondering, because after that he started claiming depression and all these anxiety issues and everything out in the public school setting and everything. So it would cover up anything that I would ever say.
Well, it would also give him the Violence Against Women's Act against you.
Exactly, and so I'm wondering, in those types of situations, how would, because this is only a matter of months ago, and I've had so many people tell me, you need to go and make sure he can't get immigration status.
Well, if he was blackmailing you, then how you make sure he doesn't get immigration status is go take out a police report. Go to the prosecuting attorneys, lay it all out there. Then you know what? That will come up on his biometrics. When they run all that stuff, you're going to get a hit, and then he's going to have to explain it away. Now, one of the things we kind of didn't talk about, and let me kind of go through this, is when a lot of times when I don't have that evidence, I don't have gunshot wounds and bite marks and whatever, we send people out for psychological evaluation.
Well, if you have text messages, or
we print them
like
off.
That kind of amendment, like
You can make a log.
Yeah.
Right, the logs.
Yeah,
kind of
we
thing,
log them
for
in,
those of the
yeah.
things that-
Yeah, they won't listen to like phone messages, and they won't watch videos because they just don't have the capacity to do that. But we do use them. Anything we can get printed, we print. You just put it together. It's kind of funny. I never kind of wanted to be an attorney. You probably figured out from the hair and the clothes. I was an opera singer, and I lost a bet with my dad, and I had to go to law school. So I'm a right brain thinker, so I'm very creative and all that kind of stuff, but all the other guys, they're left brain thinkers. So when it comes down to doing these kind of cases, they don't have the creativity that you need. Because my thing is okay, I got to prove X. Okay, now let me think of every possible way under the sun to prove this thing. And that's when it gets creative. I had a guy who, his parents brought him in at 11 months old. Also had a guy who was 2 days old that his parents brought him in. Never realized they weren't U.S. citizens until they lost their driver's licenses. So the one guy Because there's the thing about, did you derive citizenship and your parent had to live here, you know, at least 5 years after the age of whatever, and so I'm sitting there, and this guy's like 65, and we're looking at each other, and I'm like, okay, mom's dead, dad's dead, great aunts and uncles, all dead, you know, aunts and uncles all dead, everybody's gone. So I finally looked at him, and I looked at his wife, and I said, you told me you like to do genealogy. She says, yes. And I said, could you go down to the library for me? And I want you to look for these years in the phone books, because they keep the municipal phone books. And at that time, not only did they tell you where you lived and your phone number, but they told where you worked and what you did for a living. And that's how we proved that his dad was here 5 years, was from pulling up the municipal phone books. And when my client went to immigration, the immigration officer says, that is slick. I have never seen that before. And so, you know, so you have to think about those situations. But for you, I mean, if you're really, really worried about that, because the thing I didn't tell you, which now you're really going to want to do this, is that if you're the U.S. citizen and an application is approved on that, you're never immigrating anybody else again. You're done. They don't tell you that. You'll never get a notification, but anytime you send something in for somebody, it's just going to magically kind of get lost, and they're just magically not going to process it. So you don't want that in your life, so you need to, you know, stand up for yourself, go in and do what you need to do. Yes?
Sort of kind of follow up on what she said.
Mhm.
Can she file charges as a criminal? Because
Yes,
otherwise if they
because
have a
it's
criminal,
blackmail.
yeah, because if they have a criminal background, then that's taken into consideration, and then you cannot get approved for the immigration because that.
That's what I was telling her. So that, then when will they find that? They'll find that when they do his biometrics. So what would happen is he'd file everything, looks really groovy, they might give him a 9360 and approve it, but what's gonna happen is, well, actually they won't, because on the I-360 you have to prove that you don't have anything like that in your past. So you have to give them police checks or whatever, or they eventually do them themselves. They're gonna find it.
Well, and one of the things I've done with, I'd actually, because he was still going to college, and I'd gone to the student, what is it called? Of International Affairs office.
Oh, yeah, DSO,
Mhm.
designated student official.
Yeah, and so I went to them, and I set up a meeting and everything, and I told them about, like, showed them the text and all this, and they were like, we can't do anything because he hasn't actually hurt you.
Well, they can't really do anything because even though they're part of USCIS technically, they don't have that. They can't do that. So the way to get it done is you just need to, you know,
Police report.
yeah, make an appointment with the prosecuting attorney, or go down, talk to the police and show them everything you got.
Now, if I went directly to his immigration attorney,
No,
would that, no?
no, you need to screw his record. Well, okay, so let's say, so say I'm his immigration attorney and you come in, I'm gonna look at him and say, you know, she came in here, we can use that against her.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
Because now, you look like a crazy lady.
right.
And you're trying to get to me, so I've had those kind of things, and we've used it against everybody. So, no, you're gonna have to really get tough or live with the consequences. And I'm really sorry, but these things do happen every day, so don't feel singled out.
Well, I was just wondering from an immigration lawyer's point of view, if you'd ever seen something like that.
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
lots of times. 26 years worth, a lot of times. You know, that's why the hair is dyed red, because it's all white underneath there. And I ironed every one of them. So let's talk about you. Oh, yeah.
I just had a question that's slightly different, and that is that with Creative Women of the World, sometimes we try to bring women here from the countries where we're working. And twice now, we've been denied a woman from Haiti and a woman from Kenya because they were not able to show that they own property in their own country. What will help us make them have a successful entry and get a visa here?
Well, okay, so what she's talking about is when somebody comes in on a visitor's visa or a non-immigrant visa, that you don't have the ability to stay. You're looking at 219B designation, right? Which was failure to prove that you had the intent to return upon completion of the visa. So when you're bringing somebody in, though, I don't know what you're bringing them in for.
Well, we were bringing them in for a conference and further training.
Oh, okay, did you give them proof of all the conference?
I did,
and stuff?
yeah.
And they got proof of their income at home and that
And
we're
that we
leaving
were a
everybody
nonprofit
home?
and all of that.
And that they left everybody and their dog at home?
Yeah, yeah, she has her 5-year-old daughter she's leaving behind and,
Yeah, well, but from those countries?
yeah. So, what we were advised was that sometimes the adjudicator, if you can get a different one on that end, that you might have more of a chance. Is that,
Yeah, I mean, you know.
it's kind of random.
Who is the company that does that stupid thing? It's like, you know, we have the human element. I hate the human element.
The Dow?
Is it?
No.
Every time I see that, I think, God, I hate that. I hate that so much. Because the human element, I don't know who I'm talking to.
Right.
I'm sending people on the other, maybe she looks like somebody's Aunt Cindy who used to beat them with a stick. You're never getting a visa, and I can't do anything about it. So, you know, yeah, it's nice when they're, you know, when they're playing with you nicely, but when these kind of things happen, I'm gonna tell you, from the countries you're from, Haiti, there's no way, because they probably come in and they think she's gonna do temporary protected status, or, you know, if you're bringing people in from a country that we have mass quantities of violators, they're not gonna do it. You know, because there are a lot of cultures that it's okay to leave the kid behind and come in, because grandma takes care of them, or grandpa takes care of them, whatever, you
The
know.
one woman from Kenya is young and beautiful, and I think, and she's a widow, and I think but you don't think she'll ever get a chance?
Unlikely. I mean, to be honest with
Yeah.
you, it's really
Yeah.
unlikely. I'm not telling you it's fair, but I'm telling you that they're trying to do what they can do. I did one for somebody who is almost got his green card. I mean, we're just sitting there basically to finish up consular processing, and his mom is dying. She's on a ventilator. We don't know how long she has. I put everything together, whatever. He went in, did their thing, and I let him know, here's what we have pending. This is where we are. We're at the National Visa Center. This is expecting to whatever. We'll post a $5,000 bond, and we'll take all of, which you could do. We'll take all limitations on visas. No AOS, no EOS, no COS, which means no extension of stay, no change of status, and no adjustment of status. And they looked at him and said, we don't care. Well, she's not gonna live long enough for another try. You know, so, and what was the point? He's already got probably $15,000 invested, right? He was leaving his wife and child there, who have visa applications also, right? They're all gonna take with him. You know, why would he come in and adjust status? He lost all that money, right? And then we have to go back through and do it all, and it's gonna take an extra year or two, but the officers just seem to not think that that was enough. Some people, there's never enough, and that's the problem. The other thing that you have some issues with when you're dealing with foreign consulates is that a lot of times the workers that you're dealing with are not Americans. They hire a lot of locals. So I had somebody who, they won the diversity visa lottery. You guys know what that is? Yeah, there's a lottery that if you're from certain countries, you can put in, and we'll give so many green cards a year if you meet the qualifications, and they pick your number. So I had a woman who won. Her daughter was here going to college, and mom happened to be visiting, so I did those. So then we had to follow to join, send over for dad. But if it's not done by September 30th at 5 o'clock at wherever he's at, right, he loses out forever on that. So we had everything in, and we kept sending, and they kept saying, we didn't get it, we didn't get it. So I used congressional office, and we had that sent even internally through the State Department. Didn't get it, didn't get it, didn't get it. 3 days. 3 days until we time out now. And so finally, a phone call was made to the ambassador, and so they went in and looked at the officer. She had all of them. She was selling them. She was going to sell his green card. So she had all of those notices in her desk. All of them. Like 10 that we had sent over the last 2 weeks before that, because this was one that was right down to the wire. This poor man sat in a suit for 3 days, holding his briefcase, waiting for the phone to ring. They called him, and it was 2 in the afternoon. They close at 5, right? It's September 30th, and it's a 2-hour train ride. Dude gets on the train, has all his stuff, gets to the embassy. The vice consul comes down front, ushers him in, they print him, they go to laminate the visa, and the machine broke. They get it up and running at 4:55. They laminate his visa, and then they said, we're not giving you your passport because we haven't done your background checks, we haven't done your medical. So come in on Monday, we'll do all that stuff, and then we should have that back to you by Wednesday. And that's what he did. And when that poor man got to this country, my understanding from the family was he got off the plane, gets into the airport, kisses the carpet, and his wife says, well, now that you're here with permanent residency, we can go back and visit anytime. He looked at her and says, I'm never going back. Not what it took me to get out there, I'm never going back. So, there are things, and crazy things happen. Okay, so let's talk about U applications. And those are victims of qualified crimes. Now, they have a crime list, which we're not going to go through because we'll figure it out. So let's talk about who are the victims. So victim rules for these are a little different. I mean, you've got the direct victim, right? And then you've got an indirect victim, but they have to show like enough harm. So I had somebody who miscarried a baby because she went down to see how her brother was doing, and they had been executed in her basement, in their basement apartment, and she miscarried. I have another one where, and I'm not sure what I'm more worried, or what I was more upset about, is that he lived in an apartment where somebody got shot and killed in the apartment above him, or the fact that when the body hit the floor, it went through his ceiling and landed right next to him. He was on his couch. Boom.
Oh my.
Right above. And then the shooter wasn't sure they'd really killed him. So you see the arm come down, and they're just blowing the load into the body. That's another one that works. But then we have things like sexual molestation of the children, even if they're U.S. citizens, itty minor children and the parents, you can get, even if they're not in the U.S. We had one of those. Mom was here with like 8 kids, and Dad was still overseas. And we did all his paperwork, and unfortunately, he was murdered before we got him into the U.S. And those kind of things happen. So we look at, we figured out who our witness is, or who, is the person who has been harmed. We bootstrap as many family members as we can. We look at police reports. Sometimes we don't have police reports, even though you really think you would in this situation, but sometimes we can do it off of like DCS reports, Department of Children's Services. We've been successful with those. We've used some other odds and ends. I mean, we have to have, right, we have to have a qualifying crime. I gotta have a victim, right? So we gotta make that relationship. The next thing I look for is, can I get somebody to sign off? Because I have to have somebody from an agency that that does investigatory stuff. So that includes like DCS, CASA could be a possible one. A lot of times we use the police here because we have victims assistants, and they're really awesome. We work with them a lot on these kind of cases, and they have been nothing but wonderful. Some counties it's the prosecuting attorneys. I can tell you that they're generally not so awesome and wonderful. But we use whoever we can to sign off, and then I have to have this ongoing harm, which for some people it's psychological, but other people, we have cuts and broken bones and, medical stuff that's always gonna kind of be there. The crimes that they give us a list, but don't get too caught up in that, because really anything that has the potential to be harmed, that potential of physical harm is enough, okay? And then I need to show that somebody cooperated with the investigatory agency, called the police, DCS, whatever was going on, and then, then we just show whatever. So sometimes it's psych reports, sometimes it's medical reports to show that ongoing harm. These are great, except they take too long. So we only get 10,000 primaries. And what I mean by primaries is, let's say I have one person in the family that was molested. So that's my primary, right? And then the 7 brothers and sisters and mom and dad, those other, 9 people, they're not counted against that 10,000 limit. But still with that, we have backlogs, huge backlogs. So we send them in, they kind of got sort of approved. It's like, yeah, we're gonna approve you, but we don't have a visa. So they give them deferred action. And deferred action is the same thing that you hear about with the DREAM Act stuff, where you get work authorization, you can get a social security card, and if you can pass the driver's license test, you can have one of those too. They'll do that, and then when you get that U visa, it's good for 4 years. Don't travel on it. You theoretically can, but it's not safe. So I don't let my people travel on those outside the U.S. And after 3 years, we can get you permanent residency. We file for permanent residency, and they're granting those, and we can get a lot of fee waivers on those. So we try to get as many fee waivers as we can in those situations. Okay, T visas, trafficking in humans. Can anybody tell me what kind of humans do we traffic in? What are they doing when they get here?
We just had a really good talk about that, and it's in all areas, sex, labor, all kinds of things.
The one that you see, well, the one that doesn't come to my office is the sex trade. Do you know why? Oh, when they're done with you, they usually kill you and organ donate you, so you don't survive. So if you get in that, your chances of getting out, a lot of in any capacity, is slim to none. I mean, you really aren't making it out. And we have that going on here in Fort Wayne. We have it all. I feel like it's all going on. Nobody ever sees it, but I guess me. But, because it all comes to me at my office. Ones that I've had to, the ones that I've had to do have been all labor related, house slaves, even those children, a lot of the children that have gotten caught at the border, right, that we put them in like a detainment and then we put them, and then they come, a lot of those kids are actually sent for labor purposes. They're actually trafficked in humans. Now, I won't make that application if I can pick a better category, and we'll talk about that one next. But, there is that. There is that component that the American public are not being told, and I don't think people are kind of thinking it through. But that's what a lot of them are. I mean, I have a lot of people in my office that are like, oh man, I got here when I was 13, and, they just put me to work, grew a mustache, they put me to work, and, I have a 5th grade education, or I have people who have 2nd and 3rd grade educations, can't even write their names, can't even print them. I mean, that's really not uncommon, especially with people coming in from Mexico and Central America, because they're, the educational system and just how things have been. It's a rough place to be from. So when I look at somebody who's trafficked as a human, man, there's usually no evidence of how they were brought in, because a lot of times they're like, just say you're my kid, and they have a birth certificate, and they just kind of, bring them in. We had a case that I didn't end up taking. They ended up needing somebody to take them to do course up in Chicago, but it was a young lady who was found in Illinois. We really don't know where she was born, because it was a baby mill. And so they had all these little Hispanic children, and they had like 5 boys and 8 little girls, and they only had 1 birth certificate, 1 male and 1 female birth certificate. So nobody knows what they were, selling them on the black market, which is trafficking. And she went through this before this provision existed. But basically, they went in, they did the rape, they take all the babies out, and then they adopted her out and did all these things, and the family just thought everything was fine because they were told it was. She hits 21 and needs to do certain things, and all of a sudden it comes up with, you're not a citizen. Prove it. Well, how can she prove it when they had 1 birth certificate for all these little girls? And nobody knows if she was born here or not. Because the 2 people who got 20 years apiece or whatever, well, they're not talking. They don't know how many babies that these people had sold. I mean, it's crazy. You wouldn't really think about that, would you? I mean, that was like something I just kind of looked and said, wow, that's unusual. That was really unusual. a lot of times, like I said, the ones I see are kind of house slaves or people who are brought in to work. Most of the time, they were sold by their families, which is also a really hard psychological thing to deal with. And there's not usually any police reports. I usually have somebody who escaped. So it's like, I escaped, I'm 16, I lived on the streets, I did this and this and this and this, and now, you know, I'm 28, and, you know, I'm married and I have kids, and I got nothing. And because you can't prove how they entered, right, it's really hard to get through that process, and they don't want to be leaving the country, or maybe that marriage isn't going very well. We still have all kinds of problems because we can't prove that that entry was due to the abuse. I mean, there's just all kinds of dynamics there that are just horrible. So what we do is there's actually an organization, and they do free psych exams for asylees and people kind of under this bottle kind of stuff. And the only one that's close to us, or at least was last year, was up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. They are wonderful. I think it's Dr. Griffith. And we've sent people up there, and not only do they do the psych evaluation, they kind of do some of my job for me, which even makes it, you know, happier for me because it's less work, but they will go and pull up the reports from the different countries. Like one I had was from Nigeria. Well, you know, there's quite a market in humans out of Nigeria, and it's well documented. And they're saying, you know, like 30,000 children every year are sold. And, you know, some go into the sex markets in Europe, some, you know, are house slaves, they strip them all over the world. And, you know, so you can kind of prove that this is something that's going on. We had no police reports. I called the FBI and said, hey, do you want us to make a report? And you know what they told me? We are not in the business of helping people. And I said, that is awesome. I am so glad to hear that my taxpayer money is being crapped away and the people who are supposedly making me safe are not doing so. 2 thumbs up. He knew I was pissed when I got off the phone. You know, it's like, well, why should I, you know, candy coat it for you? You were a jerk. Awesome for you. But I know that door is closed in this community. The FBI are not going to help you. I've had some other organizations here that were investigatory, and they said, oh no, we're not allowed to do that, that's illegal. I said, no, it's legal. Look, you're on the list. You meet those criteria. So if you don't want to help me, that's fine, except, you know, don't tell me you can't legally help me because that's just a lie. Come on. So why are you wasting my time? It's usually what I tell them. Why are you wasting my time today? So, yes.
I have a question. I'll make it really brief, but I started working in Haiti in 2007, and I had a woman who came up to me who was in the training that I was doing down there for business, and she said, I really have a favor to ask of you. I need you to find my daughter in America. When she was 5 years old, somebody came to me and said, I will promise to give her a better life in America if you give her to me. And that was 10 years prior to that time, and she had not heard one word in all that time. And she said, Lorelei, would you please find my daughter for me? And I was like, oh my gosh, you know, how in the world? Obviously, I scoured the internet. But my question is there any kind of database of people who are of questionable entry into the United States that we could search?
Not that you and I are going to be able to look at.
Yeah.
That's all federally, whatever.
Yeah.
So let me also explain something to you, though, because I have one of my paralegals is from Venezuela. She's actually also Spain, but her parents moved to Venezuela. Joyce says I'm Spanish, but I was assembled in Venezuela. But the truth is that if you are a poor family, it's very common to go to somebody and say, you know what, I'm going to give you Consuela, and she's going to come in and work for you, and then, you know, take care of her and send her to school because I don't have money to do that. So then you've got that whole cultural thing. Okay, is this bad? Is this good? You know, what's acceptable? Because not the whole world doesn't have our thought process, and they don't have the same mores and norms, and things work differently. So then you know, okay, so then when do I have the intent to be a really bad person? Because maybe this girl, they just changed her identity and maybe she had a wonderful life. I mean, I have a friend whose dad is Polish descent. His mother was first generation over, his dad was first generation over. But we never knew who his mother was because she was working at the age of like 12 or 13 for this family in, I want to say Switzerland or somewhere over there. Anyway, and they had gotten visas to come to the United States, and their 13-year-old daughter, same age as her, had died. And so they said, you're coming with us. And so they changed her identity, so nobody ever knew what her real name was. Nobody ever knew anything about her because she would never talk about it because she was afraid she'd be deported. She died without anybody ever knowing who she really was. Not that she wasn't loved, but just that, you know, there wasn't that, and she never looked up her family. And those kind of things happen, and especially when you see time of war and you see, you know, refugees and moving people around, and, you know, you do have these kind of things going on. You know, and then you have DNA testing, or I have somebody comes in and says, okay, this is my child, here's the birth certificate. Well, okay, they're not really mine. They were really my cousin so-and-so's, but we don't know where they are. So when we didn't have a birth certificate that had been recorded before, so I just had them put my name on the birth certificate, so I adopted them, which of course makes me just go like, because that is a very hard thing to get around, you know? But it happens every day, and it's not always bad. And so it's really hard some days to sit in that chair and try to figure out, you know, who's naughty and who's nice, and what was the reason that we did these things. So yeah, you know, there's probably no way unless that child, and that child was probably, because they were 5, they probably really don't have much of a memory. They were probably told that that wasn't really their mom or whatever. Okay, so the thing with the T visas though is they're good for 4 years, like you use. After 3 years, they can get permanent residency, and they're pretty liberal with them. They're also, you know, the same thing about, you know, waiving filing fees and all that kind of stuff happens. So, awesome. The last thing is special immigrant juvenile that I wanted to go through, and special immigrant juvenile is for anybody who is, and it's weird because it's different in different states. So I have to have somebody who is a juvenile that comes under the purview of the courts, right? And then I have to have certain determinations made. And, you know, so we have to say, like, you know, this child is from this country, and yeah, we don't really have any documents, but, you know, they have been the subject of abuse, neglect, or abandonment underneath the Indiana statute. Being reunited with one or both of their parents isn't really going to happen. It's unlikely. And that it's better for them to be here than to go home. And the cool thing about that is we used to have to, like, have the parental rights would have to be terminated. And so those are very hard because even when you're in the system, they really don't want to terminate those rights. And so the early versions were not very doable. The current version is awesome because I just have to have a guardianship with the right language. And that child gets a permanent residency card very quickly. But here's what else we found out, is that your parent could be your guardian as long as the other parent is kind of gone and missing and whatever. And that parent can get a guardianship in themselves, even if they're illegal, as long as they've lived in Indiana long enough. So you can actually have an illegal parent get a guardianship in their own child and give their child permanent residency. Now that child can never file for either of their parents. So, you know, it's very much a labor of love thing, where you see these parents making sure that their children are okay, even if it doesn't further their interests. You know, and that's a very big deal. And we see this in my office a lot. And we use this like with the children that are caught at the border. We will use that in whoever they release them to, We can sit down and do a guardianship, and then we get these kids legal status. So even though they're in court proceedings, we can go back and say, hey, we filed this, you know, we got this piece approved, so now we need to terminate proceedings, and then go back and do the adjustment of status. If I have somebody who's not in proceedings, that entire process takes 90 to 120 days, which in immigration speak is instantaneous. Because, you know, we used to, when I started, if you were Filipino and you filed for like your brother or sister, you know, they're in the Philippines, you're a US citizen, it was a 36-year wait. Yeah, Mexico doesn't have the longest wait times. Everybody wants to believe that, but that's not true. The Philippines is worse. I think we're down to 26 now, 26-year wait. Yeah, it's amazing. So you think about that. That's like a whole lifetime. A whole lifetime. And, you know, it causes stress and frustration, and it's not a very workable system at times. So special immigrant juvenile was something that, even in its early forms, I felt needed to be done in Fort Wayne. And the reason why is that I felt that it was very unfair to take a child, put them into foster care, get them all the way to 18 or 21 or whatever, and then say, okay, you're on your own. Now wait a minute, I can't go to college, I can't get a driver's license, I can't work. What am I gonna do? And I got nobody to help me. What do you do with these children? And so I had a conversation with some of the judiciary here, and I kind of said, you know, look, guys, we're just raising the next set of abused, neglected, drug dealers, prostitutes, thieves. That's what you're doing with my taxpayer money, and frankly, they're not legal. So, you know, I think there might be taxpayer standing to sue the state over this, because our taxpayer funds are being used inappropriately. And it's all because you're abusing them by not getting them immigration status when you can. Because every one of these children could come back into this community and they can contribute. Because that's what the U.S. is about, right? We all come in, we all contribute. So, yeah, maybe we had a bad time and we had to be on food stamps, or we had to do this, or we had to do that, and we all, you know, needed help. That's fine. But kind of the social contract to this country is, okay, you help me today, but tomorrow I'm going to be successful, and I'm going to pay it in because you were good enough to take care of me. And when you deny an entire group of people that opportunity, I mean, that's just, in my mind, is horrific. So those are the things that, you know, I was kind of fighting with them about, and they finally do them now. So the Department of Children's Services actually does file these for children that are in the foster care system. Not all of them, but we're getting better. And every child that we make legal is one more prospective citizen. You know, and they all come with wonderful things to bring all of us that we never had before. We good?
Sorry to cut you
Oh,
short.
no, we're good. I'm done. I did all my paperwork. Are you guys fine? Okay. Oh, you're welcome.
We have our last speaker just before we end the day, and when you guys are leaving, I have the certificates of the CEUs up. If I
A veteran and a refugee. Only my war lasted longer than the Vietnam. I was married for 10 years, and I moved across states but not countries. So I can relate to everybody who spoke here today, actually. I was born and raised in Pakistan, and then I used to come and visit United States, and then I was 19 when I got married. And I have 3 kids. I have a daughter and 2 boys, and they're amazing. My oldest 2 are actually preparing for their SATs, and they will take that in June next year. And then my youngest one is in 1st grade, but he's also taking advanced math classes. They're all advanced level students. I think the best thing that I ever did for us was to pull us out of that situation. And like Scott was saying earlier, that there are signs and there are red flags. But the most crucial, important first step is to break the silence. Yeah, everybody needs to know that you have to break the silence. And then after you've taken that first step, it becomes easier. And I know that you cannot connect the dots looking forward, but you will be able to connect those dots looking back. And if I can start over with a negative $1,000 in my bank account, 3 kids, and no previous job experience, I think everybody can. There are resources available. There is help available. You just have to tap into it and let the law help you. You have everybody, I mean, I cannot stress more that you have to break the silence. It's really important. And one thing I would like to say is that Planned Parenthood, when I came here, I did not have any immigration status. I came on I-94. I had visitor's visa, but then my status changed. My ex was not a U.S. citizen, was only a permanent resident, and only after when we filed the paperwork so I can change my status because I wanted to go back home and visit because I did not come here with the intention to get married and permanently stay here. I was just visiting my brother. So when we applied for the paperwork, I found out that his citizenship was denied. And it was because of the previous criminal charges. Even if you have registered to vote as a permanent resident, that counts towards that. And I was not aware of any of that. So it's been a struggle, but I started 2 years back working at Old Navy, and now I'm working downtown for a really big IT firm. I'm also going to school at Penn State to complete my undergrad IT degree, and I'm a junior, and I'm going to be done in another year. And I have tapped into all of these resources. As Jennifer was saying, I have the whole card. It's really good. I have a protection order. It's actually just like your driver's license, like she said. I keep it in my wallet, and I also get texts and notifications on my phone if there's a change ever or if there's an update about it. So that is really good. And then Prevail actually helped me get the protection order. There was no cost to it. And they also offer to go with you to the court because when you're going through this divorce and the custody battles, it is really difficult, especially if you're alone. So, and I wanted to really come out and share this because I know not a lot of people, they break the silence and they come out and share the story, especially from the culture that I'm from, like in the Pakistani culture. Even getting a divorce or thinking about it was not considered a good thing. So, yes, I've been through a lot. I was also put through all kinds of abuse, physical, emotional, mental, all kinds. You name it, I've been through it. Like just a couple of examples, I would sometimes was put into closets and timeouts because apparently I did something wrong and now I have to sit in the closet for however long without lights on, and I was in timeout like you would put a little kid. So yeah, but there is hope. There are a lot of resources available, and like Scott and Jennifer were saying that there's a lot of initiatives around. You just have to look into it and just have to be supportive of some of the women that are going through this and not be judgmental. And especially in our culture, it's like, you know, like what you went through, there will always be that fear of unknown. Like what's gonna happen? There will always be what's, buts, ifs. But then at the end of the day, you have to overcome it. And lastly, I would just like to share, I'm not gonna keep it long, I know everybody has to go. I know some of the people drove 2 hours. Just lastly, I would like to share that I know, and everybody else in the room knows, that no matter what happens, we deserve to be respected. we all deserve to feel safe, and we all deserve to be loved. I know I do, and everybody else does too. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask me. I'm more than happy to share. And if you know somebody who would like to reach out to me, I can pass my email along too, because I've been through the immigration process, the protection orders. I had to go into shelters a couple of times, and I've been through all the threats and all the manipulations and the cycle of abuse and the grief cycle, the counseling, pulling the kids through out of this, and the court proceedings, dealing with lawyers, dealing with family, finding the support system. So if you know somebody who would like to reach out, I can pass my email along, and you can get it from Rima as well. And I'm available, and I would like to help anybody and answer any questions. Anybody has any questions? Okay, perfect. So you can, I'll pass my email along, and you can also get it from Rima. Okay.